It started with a letter that looked far too official to ignore. I still remember the morning light pouring through my kitchen window, cutting sharp lines across the countertop as I sorted through a week's worth of mail. Bills, flyers, a catalog I didn't ask for, and then this envelope. It was thick, sealed with a golden emblem that shimmered faintly under the sun. Across the front, bold black letters read, Willow Creek Homeowners Association. I frowned. I lived in Colorado now, not Montana. The only property I still owned out there was my late father's ranch, 500 acres of open land, quiet hills, and old wooden fences that creaked when the wind ran through them. There was no neighborhood, no board, and definitely no association. Still, curiosity got the better of me. I sliced it open. Inside was a letter written in sharp, businesslike language. It claimed I owed several $1,000s in unpaid maintenance assessments, plus penalties for ignoring previous notices. It even warned that legal action might be taken if I didn't comply within 30 days. For a few seconds, I just stared at the page, unsure whether to laugh or worry. Then I noticed something that stopped me cold. The property address listed wasn't wrong. It was exactly my ranch, parcel number, coordinates, everything. Down to the very fence line my father had drawn himself. My pulse kicked up. I flipped to the second page, where I saw what looked like my own signature, scrawled under the words Acknowledged Member. That's when I set the papers down and just sat there, feeling the air tighten around me. My signature was close, but not perfect. Someone had copied it. Someone had taken the time to forge my name on a legal document. I tried calling the number at the bottom of the letter. A woman's recorded voice answered, "The Willow Creek Association office is currently unavailable. Please leave a message." Her tone was polite, but mechanical, too polished, like something pre-recorded. I called again. Same thing. Then I looked up the address printed on the letterhead, a business plaza in a nearby Montana town. I opened the map app on my phone. Street View showed a vacant lot with a for lease sign. That's when the first uneasy thought hit me. This wasn't a clerical mistake. Someone had gone through a lot of trouble to make this look real. I went to my filing cabinet and pulled out my father's old property documents. He'd been a rancher his whole life, the kind of man who believed in paper trails and hard proof. There it was, our original deed, stamped and dated more than 40 years ago. The land had passed to me after he died. No homeowners association had ever existed there. But the letter said otherwise. Over the next few days, I received 2 more envelopes. One looked like a reminder notice, the other like a warning, both from the same association. The tone grew colder, more direct. Words like noncompliance and collection process started showing up. Whoever was behind this wanted me scared, confused, or both. By the end of the week, I couldn't think about anything else. I called a few old neighbors near the ranch, people who'd lived out there for decades. Most of them hadn't even heard of the Willow Creek Association. But one man, Dale, a retired surveyor, hesitated before answering. "Oh yeah," he said finally. "I've seen those signs go up. New development. Big project east of your land. They've been spreading fast." "What kind of project?" I asked. "Some luxury housing thing, I think. They've been talking about turning that whole area into a community, new roads, a golf course, all that." I gripped the phone tighter, "Even my land." He was quiet for a moment. "From what I've heard, yeah, they're calling it Willow Creek Estates now." My stomach dropped. Estates, not ranch. Someone had taken my family's land and renamed it on paper. That night, I pulled out an old photo album my father kept in the barn, a photo of him standing in front of the main gate, hand resting on the wooden post he carved himself. Willow Creek Ranch, burned into the plank with steady letters. That gate had stood there for over 50 years. The idea of someone replacing it made my chest tighten. I stayed up late searching through county records online, clicking through every property listing connected to the name Willow Creek. Sure enough, there it was, my parcel number, labeled Lot 14. The document had been filed less than 2 months ago. That was the moment I knew it wasn't just a mistake or a scam. It was a plan. A quiet, careful plan to take what didn't belong to them. And I wasn't about to let that happen. The flight to Montana felt longer than it used to. Maybe it was because I hadn't been back in years, or maybe it was because I couldn't shake the thought that something was wrong, deeply wrong. Every mile I flew brought me closer to a place I once called home, and further away from believing this was just a mistake. When I finally landed, the air hit me like a memory, dry, crisp, and familiar. The old rental truck I picked up from the airport still had the smell of hay in the back, which made me smile. For a brief second, I forgot about the letters and thought about the summers I spent riding out past the creek with my father. But that warmth disappeared the moment I drove past the first sign that said, "Welcome to Willow Creek Estates." It wasn't just a sign, it was a statement. The dirt road that used to lead to my ranch now had fresh pavement, and newly painted street signs stood where open fields used to be. I slowed down, confused. There were fresh survey markers everywhere, neon orange flags stabbing into the soil like warnings. A few workers in safety vests were hammering wooden posts into the ground, laughing as they worked. They looked too comfortable, too at home. Like they belonged here and I didn't. I pulled over near the gas station at the edge of town, one that had been around since I was a kid. The owner, Betty, recognized me before I even walked through the door. "Well, I'll be," she said, leaning over the counter with a grin. "Haven't seen you in years. What brings you back?" "I got a letter," I said, "from something called the Willow Creek Homeowners Association." Her smile faded. "Oh, them." I frowned. "So you've heard of it." "Everyone has," she said quietly. "They've been buying up land left and right, putting up fences, telling folks what they can and can't do. But honey, your place, that's miles out. You never lived under any of that." "I didn't," I said, "but apparently I do now." She sighed and looked toward the window, where a new sign stood across the street. A polished board that read Willow Creek Development, managed by Davison Land Group. When I saw that name, my stomach tightened. Mark Davison. I hadn't heard that name in nearly a decade. He was the developer who once tried to buy my ranch after my father passed, offering a low price and acting like he was doing me a favor. When I turned him down, he smiled, shook my hand, and said, "You'll change your mind someday." I guess this was what he meant. I thanked Betty and drove straight to the county office. The building hadn't changed much, same green roof, same wooden sign, but the inside was buzzing with people holding blueprints and permits. I waited nearly half an hour before a clerk called me up. "I need to check the current listing on a property," I said, sliding a folded piece of paper across the counter. 500 acres off Willow Creek Road. The clerk typed for a moment, then her eyes flicked up to me. "Do you mean Lot 14 of the Willow Creek subdivision?" I froze. "No," I said slowly. "I mean my ranch." She blinked. "Sir, this parcel is listed as part of the Willow Creek Estates development area. According to our records, it falls under management of the association." I leaned closer. "Since when?" She clicked another window. 2 months ago, the paperwork's all there. Survey maps, annexation forms, maintenance plan." She hesitated. "Looks like you signed off on it." I almost laughed. "I didn't sign anything." "Well," she said softly, "someone did." She printed a copy for me, and there it was again. My name, my signature, my land, but not my handwriting. The signature looked close enough to fool anyone who didn't know better. It was careful, practiced, copied from a real one. I could almost see my father's old pen strokes in it. "Who filed this?" I asked. She looked at the bottom of the page. "Davison Land Group," she read. "They're managing the development." I thanked her, though my voice sounded flat. My heart was pounding too hard to focus. As I walked out of the office, I passed a wall of photos, local sponsors, donors, and board members. And there he was, smiling in a new suit under the title Regional Planning Advisor Mark Davison. That night I stayed at a small motel just outside town. I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying everything in my head, the letter, the fake signature, the signs on my land. Somewhere between midnight and morning, I made up my mind. This wasn't just paperwork anymore. It was personal. And if Davison thought I'd forgot what my father taught me about standing my ground, he was about to remember exactly who owned that land. I left the motel before sunrise. The sky was just beginning to lighten over the hills, and the air carried that crisp, familiar bite of early Montana mornings. The drive out to the ranch took nearly 40 minutes, most of it on back roads that twisted through open land my father and I used to ride across. As I drove, I tried to calm the mix of anger and confusion swirling in my chest. Part of me still hoped this was some kind of misunderstanding that could be fixed with a few signatures. But the closer I got, the more that hope faded. The first thing I noticed was the fence line. The old wooden posts my father and I had hammered in years ago were gone. In their place stood metal stakes with bright yellow reflectors, driven neatly into the ground. A shiny chain-link fence now stretched across the front entrance, and right in the center of it hung a polished metal sign that read, "Private property, managed by Willow Creek Association." My truck idled as I stared at it. The words didn't belong here. They didn't belong to this land. I climbed out, boots crunching against gravel, and walked up to the gate. The padlock was brand new, the kind you buy in bulk at a hardware store. My father's handmade wooden gate had been torn down completely, even the hinges were gone. All that remained were two splintered posts and the faint outline of where the sign Willow Creek Ranch used to hang. I rested my hand on one of the broken posts. It was smooth, like it had been sanded. Someone had deliberately erased every trace of what this place used to be. I was still standing there when I heard the sound of an engine behind me. A white pickup truck rolled up the road and stopped a few yards away. Two men stepped out, both wearing bright orange vests. One carried a clipboard, the other held a phone. They looked at me like I was the intruder. "Morning," the one with the clipboard said. "Can we help you?" I raised an eyebrow. I was about to ask you the same thing. "This property, under management now," he said. "If you've got business here, you'll need clearance from the board." "The board," I repeated slowly. "You mean the one that doesn't exist?" He looked uncomfortable but didn't back down. "Look, sir, we're just contractors. We were told this area's part of the Willow Creek project. We're marking lines for utilities today." "Utilities," I said, "on my land." He glanced at the clipboard again. "According to this, it's part of the subdivision." I reached into my jacket and pulled out the deed I'd brought from home, the one with my father's signature. I held it out toward him. "You might want to check your paperwork again." He hesitated. The other man stopped filming. "I don't want trouble," the clipboard man said finally. "We're just doing what we were told." "By who?" I asked. He looked over his shoulder at the road, then back at me. "Davison Land Group. They're overseeing all of this," said the parcels were cleared for prep work. I let out a slow breath. There it was, Davison's name again. The men exchanged a quick glance before climbing back into their truck. As they drove away, the one with the phone lowered his window and called out, "You might want to talk to their office before coming out here again." I watched them disappear down the road. The silence that followed was heavier than before. I walked along the fence line for a while, tracing the new boundaries they'd drawn. Every 50 feet, another metal stake. Every corner, a new marker. It was as if someone had decided my father's fences weren't real anymore, like history could be rewritten with a few lines on a map. When I finally turned back toward my truck, I saw something that made me stop cold. Near the creek bed, half hidden under a pile of brush, lay one of the old wooden posts from the original gate. The letters carved into it were faded, but I could still make out the word Willow. I picked it up, brushing away the dirt. For a moment, I felt like I could hear my father's voice again, reminding me of the day we built that gate together. "Land doesn't defend itself, son," he used to say. "It needs someone who remembers where the lines really are." That memory settled something deep inside me. I loaded the post into the back of my truck, climbed in, and looked out across the fields. The hills rolled quiet and golden under the morning sun. They were mine and always had been. If Davison and his so-called association thought a few forged papers could change that, they were about to learn just how wrong they were. I started the truck, dust rising behind me as I drove back toward town. My next stop was the county record's office, and this time, I wasn't leaving until I had answers. The county record's office looked the same as I remembered: faded green walls, dusty blinds, and a bell on the front desk that never worked. But this time, I didn't come as a quiet visitor. I came as a man whose name had been stolen. The same clerk from before was working at her desk, tapping away at her computer. When she saw me walk in, her polite smile faltered. "Back again?" she asked carefully. "Yes," I said, setting my folder on the counter. "And this time I need copies of everything that lists my property under the Willow Creek project. Every file, every form, every signature." She hesitated, glancing toward a door-marked records room. "That might take some time." "I'll wait," I said, "all day if I have to." After a moment, she nodded and disappeared behind the door. I sat down on the wooden bench near the window, listening to the hum of old ceiling fans and the shuffle of papers. My mind was racing. I kept replaying the image of that metal sign on my fence, managed by Willow Creek Association. It wasn't just a warning. It was a claim. When the clerk returned, she carried a stack of folders so thick she had to set them down in 2 trips. "This is everything," she said softly. "You might want to take a look at these pages first." The first folder contained the annexation agreement, the document supposedly showing that I'd agreed to have my land included under the Willow Creek project. There it was again, my name, my signature, and a date from just 3 months ago. But this time, I noticed something new. At the bottom corner of the page, in small print, was a filing reference. Prepared by Davison Land Group, authorized by County Development Coordinator. I turned the page. The next file contained a set of blueprints. They showed roads, drainage lines, and a proposed layout for a luxury neighborhood right through the middle of my ranch. Every detail had been planned. The file even listed model names for houses that didn't exist yet. My jaw tightened. This wasn't just a land grab. It was a full development project built on forged consent. The clerk leaned in. "Do you want me to print the digital logs? They'll show who uploaded the files." "Yes," I said, "please." She clicked a few keys, and soon a list appeared on her screen. The most recent uploader's name flashed on the monitor: J. Fields, Davison Land Group. But another name caught my eye further down the list: Mark Davison. He'd personally approved the filings himself. I took a slow breath. The man who once stood in my kitchen years ago, drinking my coffee and promising he just wanted to help modernize the area, had been quietly building an empire on top of my family's land. I thanked the clerk, made copies of everything, and walked out into the sunlight. The town felt smaller than I remembered, as if the air itself had tightened around it. On the sidewalk outside the courthouse, I stopped to call an old friend, Dale, the retired surveyor who told me about the project. He answered on the second ring. "You find anything?" "Plenty," I said, "more than I wanted to." "I figured," he replied. "You might want to talk to someone named Sarah Walker. She used to work for Davison's company. Quit last year after a dispute about property filings. Word is, she didn't leave on good terms." "Do you know where she is?" He gave me an address on the edge of town. "She might talk if you tell her why you're asking." That afternoon, I found Sarah's small house tucked between cottonwoods near the river. She opened the door halfway, studying me with cautious eyes. "You're not from Davison's office, are you?" "Not even close," I said. "I'm the guy whose ranch he tried to steal." Her eyes softened. "Then you'd better come in." The inside of her house smelled faintly of coffee and old paper. She led me to a cluttered table covered in file boxes. "I kept copies of the work I did," she said. Davison thought deleting records would make everything disappear, but I saved them, every blueprint, every fake annexation form. She pulled out a folder and handed it to me. Inside were internal memos and email printouts, each stamped with company headers. One line stood out: acquire remaining parcels by any means necessary. I looked up at her, so it was planned. From the start, she said. He called it community alignment. But what he really meant was control. He'd file paperwork before the owners even knew, then claim they'd agreed by default. I sat back, trying to process it all. My land wasn't just another property to Davison, it was the centerpiece of his entire project. Without it, the rest of the development couldn't connect to the main access road. That's why he needed me out of the way. Before I left, Sarah handed me a flash drive. Everything's on here, she said. If you're going to fight him, you'll need this. I thanked her and promised to return the favor someday. That night, back in my motel room, I plugged the flash drive into my laptop and opened the first folder. Emails, signatures, false approvals, every line was proof of what he'd done. As I scrolled through the files, I stopped on one final document. It was labeled Willow Creek Acquisition Phase 2. And right there, under the Pending Properties section, was my name again, listed beside the words awaiting clearance. I leaned back in my chair, heart pounding. Davison hadn't just taken my land. He was planning to do it again. I woke up before dawn, my mind buzzing with thoughts of what I'd seen on that flash drive. The evidence was clear. Davison's company had created fake documents, false approvals, and had filed them like they were real. But what haunted me most was that one phrase on the last page, awaiting clearance. It meant they were still moving forward, even after everything I'd discovered. I packed my things and drove back toward the ranch. The road seemed quieter that morning, though the air carried a strange unease, like the land itself knew something was wrong. When I turned off the highway, I saw dust rising in the distance. At first, I thought it was the wind. Then I saw them, 2 trucks parked near my pasture, engines still running. As I got closer, I saw men unloading long metal rods and boxes of bright orange tape. They were setting up new survey markers. Again. I stopped the truck and climbed out. "Hey," I called, walking toward them. "What do you think you're doing?" A man in a hard hat turned, squinting at me. "We're setting lines for the new access road," he said, almost casually. "Access road," I repeated, "through my land." He gave a half shrug. "According to the paperwork, this section's already approved." "I didn't approve anything," I said firmly. "You're trespassing." He glanced down at his clipboard. "Says here it's part of the Willow Creek development area." I took a step closer. "Then your paperwork's wrong." Something in my tone must have convinced him, because he motioned for his crew to stop. "We're just following instructions," he muttered, climbing back into the truck. "Take it up with the office." "I already did," I said. Though he didn't hear me, they were already driving away, dust swirling behind them. I stood there for a long moment, staring at the bright orange flags dotting my land like tiny warnings. My father used to tell me that once someone starts measuring your land without asking, they're not planning to stop. I pulled each flag out one by one, tossing them into the back of my truck. That afternoon, I met with a lawyer in town, a calm, sharp-eyed man named Rick Turner. He'd been handling land disputes for nearly 30 years, and the moment he saw the files from Sarah's flash drive, he whistled low. "This isn't just sloppy paperwork," he said. "This is planned deception." He flipped through the pages, his expression tightening with every document. They forged signatures, submitted false filings, and even altered parcel boundaries. If this goes unchecked, they could claim ownership through quiet possession laws. "Meaning what?" I asked. "Meaning if they keep filing and no one stops them, they'll own your land on paper, even if you're standing on it." I felt my hands clench. "Then we stop them." He nodded. "We'll file a cease order and request an injunction. But understand this, it's not going to be quick. Davison has influence here. He's got lawyers, investors, and local officials who want this project to happen. I don't care how long it takes, I said. I'm not losing that ranch. Rick smiled faintly. Then you're the kind of client I like. Over the next few days, we gathered everything we could: county filings, survey records, satellite photos. Rick drafted the legal documents while I made trips between the ranch and town, taking pictures of every new stake or sign that appeared. Each one felt like another nail in the coffin Davison was building for my land. On the third day, I arrived at the ranch to find the main water line broken. A thin stream trickled across the dirt, forming a shallow puddle that reflected the fading sky. I knelt down, running my hand through the water. The pipe had been cut clean, not an accident. Someone had been here. I called Rick. They're not waiting for court, I said. They're trying to make the land unlivable. Document everything, he said. Don't confront anyone directly. We'll use it all in the filing. That night, I parked my truck near the main fence and stayed there, keeping watch. The ranch was quiet, except for the wind brushing through the grass and the low hum of crickets. I thought about my father, about how he used to walk these fields every evening before sunset, checking each post and gate by hand. I wondered what he'd say if he saw what had become of our land. Around midnight, I saw headlights flash in the distance. A truck slowed near the far end of the property, idling for a moment before turning around and disappearing down the road. Whoever it was, they didn't stop, but they wanted me to know they were watching too. When the sun rose, I walked the fence line again. Several of the signs that said private property, managed by Willow Creek Association, had been replaced overnight. The new ones were plain, white, and nailed crookedly to the posts. They read simply, "Pending development." I tore one down and held it in my hands. The paint was still fresh. They weren't slowing down, they were accelerating. As I stood there, the wind picked up across the hills, carrying the faint smell of dust and metal. It reminded me that the battle for this ranch wasn't going to be fought just on paper anymore. It was already happening out here, in the open fields my father built with his hands. And I wasn't about to let anyone rewrite that history. 3 days after filing the injunction, I started noticing things that didn't make sense. First, the mail. Letters from the county office that were supposed to go to my lawyer started showing up at my motel instead, opened. Then my bank called, saying there had been inquiries about a property loan under my name. When I told them I hadn't applied for anything, the woman on the line went quiet. "Sir," she said carefully, "the documents list your ranch as collateral." I hung up and just sat there in my truck, staring at the dashboard. They weren't just taking the land, they were trying to make it look like I'd sold it to them. I drove straight to Rick's office. He was already standing by the window when I arrived, a stack of folders under his arm. "They're pushing back," he said. "The county clerk been flooded with filings. Half of them are duplicates, the rest are forged copies. It's chaos." "Can we stop them?" I asked. "We can slow them down, but it's like playing chess against someone who keeps changing the board." I dropped into the chair across from his desk. "Then we find their next move." Rick tapped his finger on a document. "Davison's company filed for a zoning variance tomorrow morning. If it gets approved, they'll have the right to start construction legally. Once the foundation is poured, revering it becomes 10 times harder." "Where's the hearing?" "Town Hall, 9 sharp." "I'll be there." He looked at me, concerned. "Just be careful, Davison's been doing this a long time. He doesn't like surprises." The next morning, I walked into the town hall with the deed tucked under my arm. The building smelled faintly of dust and coffee. The boardroom was already crowded, men in suits, local officials, and a few people from the press. At the front sat Davison himself, wearing a dark gray blazer and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. He noticed me immediately. "Ah," he said smoothly as I approached the table, "Mr. Walker, isn't it? I was wondering when you'd show up." "I'm here to object to your variance request," I said evenly. He chuckled. "Objection? You don't even live on the property anymore, do you? I didn't answer. Instead, I set the deed down in front of the county clerk. This is my father's land, I said, and mine by inheritance. No sale, no transfer, no authorization. Every document you've filed under Willow Creek Association is fraudulent. The room went quiet. The board members exchanged uncertain glances. Davison leaned back in his chair, still smiling. Big words, Mr. Walker, but I'm afraid you're mistaken. Our records show otherwise. Rick stood beside me, unfolding copies of the altered deeds and pointing out the discrepancies. These signatures are photocopied. This parcel map has been redrawn illegally. And this approval stamp, that's from a zoning officer who retired 3 years ago. One of the board members frowned. That can't be right. It's all right here, Rick said, sliding the pages across the table. Every one of these documents has been tampered with. For the first time, Davison's smile faltered. This is nonsense, he said. Anyone could claim. Then explain this, I interrupted, pulling out a printed email from the flash drive. Your office sent this message 6 months ago. It lists my ranch as cleared for development before any approval process began. That's not a mistake, that's planning. A ripple of murmurs ran through the room. The chairwoman of the board cleared her throat. We'll need to investigate these claims before making a decision, she said. Davison's jaw tightened. With all due respect, this delay will cost the project millions. Then perhaps you should have verified your paperwork, the chairwoman replied firmly. For a moment, Davison said nothing. Then he turned to me, his voice low and controlled. You're making this harder than it needs to be. I met his stare. Good. After the meeting, I stepped outside into the bright afternoon sun. The air felt lighter, but I knew it wasn't over. The board had postponed the decision, not denied it. That meant Davison still had time to regroup. Rick walked beside me, scanning the parking lot. You did well in there, he said, but don't let your guard down. He'll find another way. I nodded, sliding the deed back into my jacket. Let him try. But as I reached my truck, I noticed something strange. A folded note was tucked under the wiper blade. I opened it slowly, expecting a flyer, but it was. The handwriting was sharp and deliberate. You can't hold back progress. Some land isn't meant to stay yours. No signature, no name, just that sentence. I looked around, scanning the street. A black SUV was parked across the road with tinted windows. The engine started as soon as I looked at it. It pulled away slowly, disappearing around the corner. I stood there for a long moment, the note still in my hand. This wasn't just about paperwork anymore. They were trying to wear me down, make me afraid to fight back. But they didn't understand the one thing my father had taught me better than anyone. When someone tries to take what's yours, you don't step back. You dig in deeper. And I was ready to dig in as deep as it took. The next week felt like a storm building on the horizon. Every day brought a new sign that Davison wasn't backing down. First came the phone calls, anonymous numbers that hung up as soon as I answered. Then the emails, accusing me of blocking community progress and standing in the way of opportunity. They all used the same phrasing, like they'd been written from a template. But the worst came on Friday. I was at the ranch, repairing the broken water line when I saw the smoke, a thin column rising from the far pasture. My heart dropped. I dropped the wrench and ran, boots pounding the dirt. By the time I got there, part of the dry grass was burning, a slow, creeping line of flame inching toward the old storage shed. I grabbed a shovel from the truck bed and started throwing dirt, shouting into the wind. It took nearly half an hour to smother it completely, my hands shaking from exhaustion. When it was finally over, I noticed something lying near the blackened edge of the fire, a half-empty gas can. I picked it up and turned it over. No label, but fresh residue around the cap. Whoever had started that fire had meant for it to spread. I called the sheriff's office, and a deputy came out to take a report. He was young, polite, but cautious. You think someone said it on purpose? He asked. I don't think, I said quietly. I know. He took notes and promised to look into it. But I could see the hesitation in his eyes, the kind that said he already knew who not to anger in this town. After he left, I stood by the burned grass, staring at the dark line it had carved across my land. It wasn't just property damage anymore. It was a warning. That night, I drove back to town and met Sarah at the cafe. She looked tired but determined. I've been digging deeper, she said, sliding a folder across the table. You were right. Davison's been funneling money through multiple shell companies. But here's the twist, one of them isn't under his name. I frowned. Whose then? She hesitated, then flipped open the folder. It's under your father's accountant, James Weller. I leaned back in my chair, stunned. Weller, he's been handling our books since before I was born. I know, she said. But after your father passed, he started working with Davison's group. I don't think he realized what he was signing, at least not at first. His name's all over the foundation documents for the Willow Creek Association. My jaw tightened. So that's how they did it. Sarah nodded. They used Weller's old authorization to legitimize the HOA filings. Every approval traces back to his stamp. It looks official unless you know the dates. I stared at the folder. Then that's our proof. It's a start, she said. But if you go after them with this, you'll need to move fast. Once they realize you've got it, they'll try to make it disappear. I nodded slowly. Then I guess we move tonight. By midnight, Rick, Sarah, and I were in his office, spreading documents across the table. Rick scanned the accountant's forms, comparing signatures. It's airtight, he said finally. We can prove Davison's group forged the HOA's existence using Weller's credentials. Once we file this with the state registrar, it voids every claim tied to it. I exhaled for the first time all day. Then we can stop them. Rick nodded, but his voice stayed cautious. They won't let it go easily. Expect pushback. As if on cue, the office lights flickered. Then darkness. Rick moved toward the breaker room, muttering under his breath. I went to the window. Outside, across the street, I saw it again, the same black SUV from the town hall. Its headlights were off, engine idling in the dark. Rick, I said quietly, we've got company. He returned, phone in hand. Backup power's out too, looks like someone pulled the line. I felt that familiar burn of anger rising in my chest. They're watching us. Then let them watch, he said, grabbing a flashlight. We're filing this first thing tomorrow. Tonight, we copy everything twice. We worked through the night, scanning, printing, sealing evidence in envelopes. The hum of the generator outside was the only sound until I heard something else, the soft crunch of tires on gravel. I looked out the window again. The SUV was gone. By dawn, the evidence was ready. Rick handed me a duplicate set of documents. Take this to Helena, he said. File it directly with the state registrar's office. If Davison controls the local office, we go above him. I nodded, and you? I'll stall him, he said. Buy you time. As I walked out into the early light, the air smelled faintly of smoke from last night's fire, a reminder of how close they'd come. I looked back at the quiet town and thought of my father's words again. Land doesn't defend itself. It needs someone who remembers where the lines really are. And now, I finally understood what he meant. This wasn't just about fences or deeds anymore. This was about legacy, and I was done playing defense. The road to Helena stretched out like a ribbon of gold under the morning sun. The documents sat on the passenger seat beside me, sealed in a thick brown envelope. Every mile I drove felt like another layer of weight lifting off my chest, but I knew the hardest part was still ahead. By the time I reached the state registrar's office, my hands were tight around the steering wheel. I parked, took a deep breath, and walked inside. The air smelled of paper and old carpet. A clerk behind the counter looked up with a polite smile. "Can I help you?" she asked. Yes, I said, setting the envelope on the counter. I need to file an emergency claim of property fraud and falsified association documentation. She raised an eyebrow. That's specific. Let's just say it's been a long week. She took the papers, scanning the top sheet. Her smile faded as she read. You have proof of this. Right there, I said. Signatures, timestamps, and false filings. Every one of them links back to Davison Land Group. She disappeared into the back office. A few minutes later, a man in a gray suit came out, the registrar himself. He introduced himself as Mr. Clay. You're saying these filings were done under a non-existent homeowners association. Not just non-existent, I said. They created it from stolen credentials. My family's accountant was used as a front. Clay flipped through the evidence. His expression grew darker with each page. You did the right thing bringing this in. If these are legitimate copies, this development is illegal from the ground up. They've already started clearing land, I said. Survey markers, utility work, everything. He looked up sharply. Not anymore. We'll be freezing all related permits until this is resolved. I nodded, feeling the first real surge of relief I'd had in weeks. By the time I left the building, the sky was turning gray with distant thunder. It felt fitting, like the storm that had been hanging over this whole fight was finally ready to break. Rick called me as I got back on the road. They know, he said without preamble. Davison showed up at my office this morning demanding to see the files. What did you tell him? That I'd already submitted them to the state. You should have seen his face. He didn't expect you to move that fast. A small smile tugged at my mouth. Good. He's angry, Rick said. But don't let your guard down. When powerful men lose control, they get desperate. He was right. When I reached the ranch that evening, a black SUV was parked at the gate again, the same one that had been following me for days. I stopped the truck and climbed out. This time I didn't hesitate. The driver's window rolled down, and there he was, Davison. No suit today, just a crisp white shirt and that same polished arrogance. You made quite the mess, he said calmly. I'm just cleaning up yours. He chuckled softly. Do you really think the state will side with you? Paperwork can be lost. Approvals can be replaced. Not this time, I said. They've frozen everything. Your permits, your filings, your fake HOA, it's all under investigation. His smile faded. You don't understand how business works, Mr. Walker. This isn't personal. Maybe not to you, I said, but this land was my father's life, and it's mine now. You picked the wrong man to push. For a moment, silence hung between us, thick as the dust in the air. Then Davison leaned forward slightly, his voice low. You think you've won, but even if I lose this deal, there'll be another one. That's how progress works. Maybe, I said, stepping closer, but not here. He held my gaze for a long second, then started the engine. Enjoy your victory, Mr. Walker. It won't last. The SUV rolled back down the road, its tires throwing up clouds of dust. I watched until it vanished over the hill. 2 weeks later, the state released its findings. The Willow Creek Association was officially dissolved, declared fraudulent. All construction permits tied to Davison's company were revoked pending investigation. Rick called me with the news, his voice bright for the first time in months. You did it, he said. It's over. But as I stood at the edge of the property, looking out over the fields, I didn't feel triumphant, not exactly. Just peaceful. The air smelled of sage and rain. The fire-scorched grass had started to grow back. I walked down to the old wooden post I'd saved from the original gate, the one with willow carved into it. I planted it firmly back into the ground, right where it used to stand. For the first time in a long while, the ranch looked like itself again. Sarah drove out that evening with a bottle of iced tea and 2 paper cups. We sat on the tailgate of my truck, watching the sunset spill gold over the hills. You really think it's over? She asked. I nodded, for now, but even if someone tries again, I'll be ready. She smiled. Your dad would be proud. I looked at the horizon, where the land stretched endlessly in every direction, untouched, unbroken, free. He already was, I said softly. The wind moved gently through the grass, carrying the faintest whisper of his voice, steady, calm, and sure. And for the first time in years, I felt like the land and I were breathing in rhythm again. Every HOA has a story on HOA headaches. You'll hear the ones they tried to bury. Subscribe today.